Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt Foundation's podcast, your guide to the fundamentals of better deer hunting. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light, go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Tony Peterson.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Wired to Hunt Foundation's podcast, which is brought to you by First Light. I'm your host, Tony Peterson, and today I'm going to ask you to take a fresh look at your old stand sites. There are certain things that separate the deer killers from like the deer watchers. And a big one is not settling for just any old stand sites. Now this may sound kind of dumb, I guess, when we talk all the time about mobile approaches and saddling up, but the truth is an awful lot of us hunt some spots where we can just put up and leave stands and blinds. And we're just kind of hoping the deer will work with us. And often they kind of don't. Now instead of getting complacent here, you should go out now and look at your best spots, and if possible, make them better. I've talked about this a lot, but back in a past life, when I was ate up with the tournament fishing scene, but still a poor college student, I fished a tour in Minnesota for a few years. Now, this was like a pro-am format, which meant that every pro would get paired up with an amateur, and they'd fish as a team for the day. It was an amazing circuit that ended up going belly up due to some embezzlement issues, and don't quote me on this, but I think probably some fraud. But before the whole thing came crashing down, I fished that tour for 3 years on the amateur side, and what I learned was incredible. Arguably the biggest lesson I got was fishing with a guy named Brad Klein during our Tournament of Champions on Lake Minnetonka here in the Twin Cities. Now, I drew Brad on day 2, and while I had an okay day 1 with somebody else, I didn't think I was in the running to win. I did know that he was a hell of a good angler, and I was excited to fish with him. Plus, I figured if we had a good day, I'd probably get paid. When we set out in a weird September thunderstorm against 39 other teams, the first spot we hit was a sunken rock pile. Now, the rock pile produced one monster muskie follow, but that was it. And it's always a little concerning when you don't put a single bass in the live well on your starting spot, which theoretically should be your best place to go. But Brad wasn't worried, so I tried not to be worried. He told me that we were going to leave that rock pile and go work some docks. And that can mean a lot of things, depending on the kind of angler you are. Working docks could be as simple as burning a swim bait or a spinner bait, swimming jig, something along the side, and then moving on to the next one. Or it could be about flipping jigs up to the posts and ladders and assorted parts of the dock that bass might like to hide under or next to. Or it could mean using something to skip way under the docks, which of course you can do with jigs, but some other lures too. And this is a real valuable skill if you fish bass for money. The last one, that skipping under the docks thing is what Brad meant. And as the guy on the back of the boat, it meant I wasn't going to get to fish a whole lot of fresh water. He was going to cast everything. And that's always kind of a bummer, but we're fishing as a team. And watching a guy like that set up and then work docks didn't make me feel too bad about being in the back of the boat. It was worth it. And I'll tell you, I thought I knew how to fish that style, and I was pretty proficient at skipping with both spinning rods and bait casters, but he was a wizard. He also knew the exact fall rate of the soft plastics he used when paired with various sizes of wide gap hooks. He knew the exact fall rate of the tiny jigs we used, and he knew when a brown one would probably work better than a white one. It was a master class on how to catch big largemouth on docks, and I loved it. I loved netting his fish and eventually catching one good one on my own to add to the live well. To see how he targeted every pole and tire and ladder and back corner and front corner and every other part of every dock we fished was like watching a surgeon work. He didn't leave much for the guy in the back of the boat, but it was incredible to see. And I honestly didn't even know that level of fishing was possible. And believe me, it set me on a course to get way better, to understand what to use and when, and to realize that I was largely underworking the available structure on so many of the lakes I fished. And it was also pretty humbling. When you think you know something and then you learn that there are way better ways to do that thing, it's a little shot to the old ego. But that's okay. That's kind of how we get better. And you know where most of us probably need to get better? That's right, golf. I'm so sorry. I swear I'm done with those jokes. We need to get better with our tree stands. While it seems like the whitetail world is full of only people using tree saddles to hunt public land, often for their YouTube channel, the truth is most whitetail hunters are pretty heavily dependent on tree stands, hang-ons, ladder stands, and I guess in some situations still climbing stands. For this podcast, I kind of just want to focus on hang-ons and ladder stands mostly. The reason for this is because right now is the time to just fine-tune those spots so you really get them right. Now, just like when I was fishing that tournament and thought I knew how to fish docks, most of you probably think you know how to hang stands. After all, how hard is it? You go to the field corner and you look around until you spy a straight tree without too many branches, get your stand up about 16 feet, and you call that shit good enough. And it certainly might be, but you have to ask yourself, is it? Or maybe more importantly, was it? A lot of us hunt the same stands or the same stand sites from year to year. But things change, cover changes, deer movement changes, and sometimes our rock solid stands start to be less fun to sit. Those are where I want to start. This requires each of us to think about our favorite stand sites from last season, or hell, the last several seasons. So do that. Now think, how did your hunts go? And this is the part that requires real honesty. Did you see deer? Probably. Otherwise, you suck at picking your favorite stand sites. But also, did any of the deer see you? Or did you experience a real quick sight burnout when you hunted there? Did you get winded? If so, how often? And in what conditions? What happened in September when you sat there? How about November during the rut? Did you have a great early season hunts, but not so great hunts when it was closer to Halloween? Let's take the deer seeing you angle first. If you got spotted a fair amount, or just by the wrong deer, what can you do to make that sight a little bit better? Can you move the stand to the far side of the tree? That's a simple solution that works quite a bit. Instead of facing the deer, face away from where you expect the deer to be. Shoot around the tree. Or can you move it a bit higher and take advantage of different cover? Sometimes you move it lower to take advantage of cover. Were the deer too close sometimes, or were they just barely in range? One of the things that's a real pain in the ass about whitetail hunting is how often we get close, but not right on the X. This happens to me all the time, and I think it's just a part of the whole thing. But how you react to it usually isn't. It's pretty easy to hang a stand and call it good enough, especially if you use ladder stands. But in bow hunting, if you're off by, 20 yards, that's a lot. In gun hunting, you can get away with that. Although you can just supersize that number and the same rules apply. Instead of being off by 20 yards, if you're off by 100 yards or 150, kind of same thing. It's time to move. Now, when I'm on the fence about something like this, I like to walk in there, And just look at my stand sites, right? I don't know, in the middle of March when there isn't a whole hell of a lot else to do. And the woods are laid bare and you can see trails usually. You can see your stand if it's still up or see the tree you usually use. Look around. Is there a better option closer to where the deer like to travel? Is there a way to use your chosen tree but make the stand less obvious? When you look up to where you usually have your setup, are you skylined from the deer's perspective? What about when they are walking in or when they are leaving? The reason this is important now is because it won't feel important in the summer. When the leaves are out and it's as thick as it's going to be all season, it's pretty easy to get overconfident in your setups. Now, if you're in a red oak or a pine tree of some sort, you might have good season-long cover. If you're not, you probably won't. Look at your go-to spots now for a stripped-down view of things. It'll change your perspective. Now, addressing the visual aspect of getting busted is pretty easy. What if you consistently get winded from one of your favorites? This one means you might just have to be more careful when you hunt it. Or again, maybe it has something to do with a microclimate at your exact spot. Maybe thermals, or the way a specific valley curls to the north or south or whatever. Maybe it's a matter of setting up a little farther uphill. Or maybe it's a matter of looking for a secondary setup that is close, but allows you to hunt different winds. Good spots are worth figuring out, my friends, and a lot of the mind grinding for figuring those spots out should happen right now. Maybe when you think back to last season, you remember that when you walked in during October for an afternoon hunt, the climbing sticks on your stand almost glowed in the afternoon sunlight. You think the deer don't notice that? They do. Or maybe you use ladder sections that creaked or squeaked or clunked or whatever. Perhaps just an upgrade to some other option will be all you need to make your favorite spot really hum. Now ask yourself about shot opportunities from your spots too. Can you shoot all over, or do you have to wait for them to hit a specific lane or window? Is it worth trimming a little now to give yourself a few more options? Because now is a really good time to do that stuff. And the same goes for entrance and exit routes. Now I've beaten this dead horse enough, so I won't keep swinging the old baseball bat at the recently deceased pony too much. But I'll say this. Maybe the most valuable thing you can do right now besides real winter scouting is to work on your entrance and exit routes. With the woods laid bare, you can see where you need to cut. And by the time spring rolls around, all your work will start to become just another feature of the woods. I have a spot on a little property I own in Wisconsin where this is a huge priority of mine. I can get to the corner of that land right now, but it's kind of noisy and a little nerve-wracking in the dark. But I want to hunt it. Actually, I want to set it up for my daughters to hunt because when there's a remotely decent buck on that property, he almost always cuts that corner and we rarely hunt it, which probably is why they're there. But as soon as the snow melts, at least a little bit more, that's priority number one for that property. It doesn't matter to me whether I slip in with a saddle to hunt it or I put up a blind for the girls in August, because what that spot needs first is a way to get in there super quietly where I'll leave as little ground scent as possible. That won't be the end of the work for that spot, though. This is a point that I think is way underappreciated in the whitetail crowd. Things change. In fact, look at how much money is spent to make sure things don't change for some hunters. You know, the food plots and the box blinds, the ponds, whatever. It's all done to make the hunting easier by producing a higher level of consistent deer usage. But for most of us, things are just gonna change. It might be as simple as the neighbor planting alfalfa instead of corn or beans, but that changes when or how the deer go by your favorite stand. It might just be that the deer on your property get hunted more from tree stands now than they ever have in your neighborhood, and that makes them look up more. It doesn't matter what causes the changes, as long as you're trying to adapt to them. This is one of the reasons why I have a love-hate relationship with ladder stands. I love them for the obvious reasons. And in some situations, they are such a good choice. But they are also big, heavy, and a royal pain in the old arse to move. This means one thing. We tend to put them up and we tend to leave them up. This, in and of itself, isn't really good or bad. It's just an acknowledgement of reality. Now, if this sounds like you, Do the same mental exercise I mentioned earlier with the hang-on stands. How did your sits go in your ladder stands last year or the last couple years? If the deer are wise to them, it's time for a plan B. Maybe you just need to zip tie some cover around the stand platform to break up your outline. Or maybe you need to move the ladder stand to a better clump of trees 10 yards away. Maybe you just need to face the platform mostly away from where the deer usually walk and then shoot around the tree if that's possible with your ladder stand. But what you don't want to do is settle just because it's a lot easier. Now, what if you don't have stands up or aren't married to any specific spots but are winter scouting and doing the work you should be doing right now? If you find a spot you want to hunt, now's a pretty good time to figure out how to hunt it. Think about it. Think about it just like you would with a go-to spot that has produced on a private property for a few seasons. Where is your absolute best tree to set up in? Don't just stand there and quickly glance at it. Call it good enough either. Really look. Is there a stretch of its trunk at your desired height that will allow you to hang a stand or saddle up? This is a mistake I make a lot, and it always makes me feel like a total dumbass. I winter scout and I find the mother lode of sweet rubs. Then I look at a tree 20 yards away and I go, that's the one. And then I walk out of the woods and I feel all good about myself. But then you fast forward 7 months and I walk up to that tree during hunting season and I look at it and it's almost instantly a realization that it won't work for some reason. And that reason is because I was too lazy way back in March to really figure the whole thing out. How and where will you set up exactly? How will you get in there? During which conditions will you be calling in sick to work so you can hunt it? During what conditions should you just avoid it? Once you get up there, will you be able to shoot where the deer should be? Will it hunt just as well in September as it does in December? Or should that specific tree and that specific spot be only like a late October setup? And also, even though I've said this a lot, I'm going to say it again. If you do this work, don't forget about setting up on the ground. Natural ground blinds are a great backup when your best spots aren't worth hunting for some reason. You know, slipping back 75 yards and tucking into a deadfall can just be the ticket. But it's a hell of a lot easier if that deadfall has been carved out and made somewhat ready to hunt well before the season, which is something you can do now. This stuff matters, my friends. Even though I know it seems like a low priority now, it's not. This is sort of like what I tell my 11-year-olds about basketball practice when they complain that they don't want to run killers or do a box out drill. You won't get good if you only play games, or if every practice is just an hour and a half scrimmage. The wins are built when the games aren't being played because they hinge upon foundational skills. In our world, this world of whitetails, we focus on some of those aspects like, off-season target practice. But we focus less on these abstract concepts like fine-tuning ambush sites to a level that offers the highest odds of avoiding detection and getting off a quality shot. So I guess that's my call to action here. At the very least, go into the woods and look at your setups. Think about how they could be better, and then make them better. If you find spots you want to hunt, but you haven't yet, think about how you'll set up there and what could go wrong if the wind is from the east or the thermals are rising at a good clip or whatever. Envision the scenarios that could cost you a deer instead of focusing solely on finding good spots and fantasizing about how fun they'll be to hunt. Then do something about it. And of course, listen in next week because I'm going to talk about some aspects of planning hunts that I haven't already covered because it's time to start thinking about those over-the-road trips that we all want to take. That's it for this week, folks. I'm Tony Peterson. This has been the Wired to Hunt Foundations podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you want some more whitetail advice or you just haven't quite scratched the itch with these podcasts, feel free to head to themeateater.com/wired and you'll see articles about deer hunting by myself, Mark, guys like Andy May, Alex Gilstrom, Bo Martonic, Dylan Tramp, whole bunch of whitetail killers. Great information there. But again, thank you so much.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, Make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.